All right, everybody. So this will be a quick version of a webinar that we put together called Shifting Gears and Changing Minds. How do we adapt our services during COVID-19? Oops, and I'll hit my 15-minute timer so I can try to pay attention to all the things online. It is a whole new world out there right now, trying to stay on top of all this. And it's all because of COVID-19. And I think we need to remember COVID-19 is part of all of the information we have around trauma-informed care. COVID-19 definitely causes trauma and chronic stress to virtually everyone, and virtually everyone in the whole world, not just our clients. And when we have a lot of trauma and chronic stress, it activates our stress response system, which kicks in our survival skills. You are probably familiar with these survival skills as fight, flight, and freeze. And if this pandemic is as dangerous as it appears to be, we want our survival skills to kick in and save us. So what's wrong with that? Well, the problem turns out that the survival skills look an awful lot like the very symptoms and problems and issues that we're frequently asked to reduce and get rid of in the children and youth that we sometimes see. Survival tools look like aggression, impulsivity, and self-centeredness, but they're designed to help us escape the threat or alleviate the pain. We need to shift gears about how we look at survival skills, how we think about them, and we should think about them as ways that any reasonable person would act in order to escape a threat or alleviate pain, including us, by the way, including all the people impacted by this right now. And we shouldn't punish trauma responses or survival skills because that creates a tremendous amount of cognitive dissonance, and you shouldn't punish the very things that help you survive because it's obviously, at the very least, a very mixed message. COVID-19 puts everybody on the crisis cycle. Again, not just our clients, but all of us. And right now we're in this, you're 5 or 6 weeks into the orders to shelter in place, stay at home, be socially distant, or I like to say physically distant. And it feels a little bit right now like we're settling in. And don't be fooled. Don't be fooled by this sense that we're kind of settling into the new normal. First of all, there's nothing normal about it. You are living through a pandemic, and it is a traumatizing experience. And secondly, it is affecting and impacting everyone. So I really enjoyed, I'm grateful for social connections and virtual and all the online platforms, which I was not always fond of in the past, but now they're super valuable to us. And this is something that I pulled from other colleagues posting on Facebook, but it really hit home for me, and so I wanted to share it here. We want to acknowledge that living through this pandemic is a trauma. And for those of us who are trauma specialists, we would like to share with you a few things that we want to keep in mind. When you are under chronic stress, your parts of your brain shut down in order for the survival parts of our brain to take over and have all the energy and focus that it needs. And so, again, I'm just going to keep saying that includes all of us. As a result, we're not always able to fully process a lot of what's going on. If you have this sensation that complexity is baffling to you right now, or if too many moving parts you have to attend to, you get overwhelmed easily. That's a normal thing to have happen when you're living with chronic stress. Some people feel numb and out of touch with emotions, and you're going to have more of that kind of feeling, being numb and out of touch with things, if you've had a lot of your own childhood adverse experiences or young adulthood traumas. Some people are also more apt to feel hypervigilant or anxious, while the same amount of people on the other end of the continuum are going to be hypoactive and depressed. Neither of those things means anything other than your predisposition to dealing with extreme stress. In-depth processing of trauma usually doesn't happen until years later when you feel safe to deal with it. So it's not like we can jump in and do treatment right now and talk about how the pandemic's affecting us and how we can overcome it, because you're still in it. And that's not a good or safe time to do that. And what we need, of course, instead of that is coping skills, so that we can cope with the fact that we're under constant duress. And finally, at the end there, when we're in the midst of trauma, just getting by emotionally and functionally is okay. We have to really take a deep breath and lower some of those expectations of our clients, of ourselves, of our colleagues, of our employees. Being kind to yourself and being kind to others will be vital throughout this entire process. Once people are on that crisis cycle, the goals get reduced to safety and survival. Now more than ever, we need to remain trauma-informed. And so trauma-informed care dictates that we should adhere to the 4 R's. These are SAMHSA's 4 R's. I've adapted them just slightly for to best relate to what's happening to us now, but here they are. Realize the widespread impact of trauma. It's 100%. Nobody goes without an impact by COVID. This does not mean, by the way, that everyone suffers equally, because of course they don't. Our marginalized and vulnerable populations will always continue to be more hard hit by these sorts of things. And so we want to recognize the trauma's everywhere, but we really need to look out for those who are less resourced and less privileged. Recognize trauma signs and symptoms. Well, I gave you the big clue with the fight, flight, or freeze. But there are lots of other ones. The inability to follow through with things, feeling a little fuzzy around the edges cognitively, all those sorts of things. Respond to this trauma by integrating all of your trauma knowledge, but not just integrating it into your work with your clients, but into your whole life with the people you see on the streets with masks and in grocery stores and delivery people and co-workers. Everybody is being impacted. And so our knowledge about trauma and how to work with people will come in really handy throughout all of this. We also need to resist re-traumatization by decreasing unnecessary triggers when possible, and certainly by not punishing survival skills. So it's time for us to shift gears. We need to realize that no one's really working on old treatment goals or plans right at this moment. Everybody's goals are now safety and survival. So in order to focus on safety and survival, we need to put basic needs first. We can understand that people are feeling overwhelmed, and it will more easily let them slip into sort of crisis and very reactionary kinds of positions. So everybody needs to understand basic crisis management skills, whatever your system and the system of care. How have you been trained to deal with crises? Because you're likely to get more and more of those as we move through this process. And we should do a lot of safety planning. The idea behind safety planning is to prevent those crises from happening. So can you get behind it and get some safety plans in place so people have appropriate responses or have guidance to how to respond to things. We can utilize and encourage anxiety reduction strategies. And again, I'm going to say, and this is for you too, you need to utilize your own anxiety reduction strategies so that you are available and present for the people that you're working with. And the bottom line for me is that we need to activate both provider and client resilience right now. To that end, this is a resiliency consensus statement that was put together with a group of young adults, family members, caretakers, and people with the Center for Innovative Practice, led by our own Dr. Rick Shepler. And this is a list of 12 components of resiliency. And I like keeping this in the slide deck for people because these are 12 different topics that can become fodder for clinical sessions and topics that you can discuss with individuals and families. and how are they doing in these different areas. However, there is an order to resiliency, and again, Rick put this together in a hierarchy for us. A lot of times in our behavioral health work, we spend a lot of time in the connections and mastery levels, skill building and improving relationships. But right now, we're going to all have to look at the bottom, was that a maroon color, I guess? Basic needs and resources. Really, every week, sometimes every day, we should be checking in with the people that we're working with on how are they doing on basic needs and resources. This doesn't mean that you have to solve or fix all of their basic needs or resources, but definitely you want to validate them, acknowledge the struggle, and try as much as possible to connect them with the best resources. So while we're working with these youth and families out there, we can think about how to increase their resiliency. And as usual, this PowerPoint will be available as a PDF. If you have trouble accessing that, you're welcome to get a hold of me. But these are all the components that we think about as being part of a resiliency plan. And I want to draw your attention to the left-hand side where it says routines and schedules. This is really being touted by a lot of people across a lot of fields as something that's going to help stabilize people. Everything feels abnormal. Nothing has its own place or routine right now because it's all different. And so helping people to find and establish routines and schedules can be very normalizing. But more importantly to me as a trauma specialist, it literally soothes your nervous system. When you can focus on what should I be doing next and feel like there's an actual thing you should pay attention to, it calms your nervous system and makes you just a little less reactive. So we do want to activate resilience with the people we're working with and within our own workforces. This is a wheel of resilience components that I use when I talk about resilience in a lot of different arenas, but I've added the two red rectangles onto here because they're specific to COVID-19. Please help people with routines, schedules, and establishing some sense of normalcy. Why we think it's kind of interesting and fun that you don't have to get dressed or take a shower every day because you don't see people face to face. You know, maybe you ought to be doing those things. Maybe that would lend you a sense of normalcy and continuity. And on the flip side, over on the right-hand side of that slide, consider helping the people that you're working with or working for. Do they have internet service? Do they have phones, tablets, or Chromebooks so that they can connect with telehealth? Because we're all being encouraged to use telehealth, but I'm not sure our most vulnerable population all have access to telehealth resources. And perhaps that's where some of our efforts and dollars should be going to help those people get more connected. This is a promotion for the book, The Deepest Well by Nadine Burke-Harris. I have loved her book since she released it over a year ago. However, I think it's all the more important to focus back in on it. She addresses 6 core pieces around the biology of toxic stress. And these 6 things are the things that we need to help people get a handle on, and you. So I would encourage you to schedule these things into your daily life right now. Enough sleep, moving your body, even if you're trapped inside a house or an apartment, you should be moving. Your body will thank you for it. Having good nutrition. My father said one of the hardest things about being locked in your own house right now is having 3 weeks of snacks available to you at your fingertips. And it's true, we're all eating those carbs, trying to make ourselves feel better, and salt and sugar and fat do make us feel better for a moment, so you're not alone, but try to be as healthy as you can. Practice mindfulness and self-reflection. Take care of your own mental health, and really look for those positive, healthy relationships. I made it exactly at 15 minutes, so Rick can't yell at me, although I suppose he could if he wanted to. And that is the end of today's didactic presentation. Good luck out there, everyone.